What's up, everyone? Welcome to another exciting live stream on Elixir Mentor, where we dive into all things Elixir. I'm stoked to have another special guest with us today, Thomas Millar. Thomas is the brain behind Instructor, a tool transforming Elixir and AI integration. He also has extensive background in machine learning, Python, and data engineering. So grab your coffee, join the chat, and feel free to ask any questions. Thomas, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's go ahead and just kick this off with a quick introduction of who you are and what your background is.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. As for me, I originally come from the Python world. I've been working and doing data science and data engineering at Stitch Fix for the past 10 years and did some big data stuff before that, working on Hadoop and whatnot. And I got pulled into the Elixir community. I started paying attention maybe about a year or 2 years ago, and then really actually jumped in the last year. It was kind of born out of a lot of the operational issues that I was finding in the Python world, and like we've done a lot of stuff in the AI and Python world, and it works, but it's not really cohesively designed. And it was in my research of how to solve some of these problems that I came across Elixir. And I really appreciate the aesthetics of it. And that's what I do every day now.
That's awesome. That I didn't realize you were in Elixir for only a year. Elixir was kind of the same thing for me. I had a buddy in my ear telling me, dude, you have to check it out. You have to check it out. And I just kept putting it off. And now I've been obsessed with it for probably 3 years now. So,
oh, nice. Yeah, it's great. It's a good language.
What ended up getting you into like the machine learning and like the large language model stuff?
Yeah, so I've been doing machine learning stuff in Python for the last 10 years at Stitch Fix. So I'm not new to that aspect of it, but and it was actually one of the reasons why I jumped into Elixir specifically last year, is because all of the machine learning ecosystem around Elixir really kind of got off the ground. And I said, okay, well, I love Elixir for all the reasons that everyone espouses, good scalability, great web framework, everyone loves live view, all these sorts of things. But I knew that the types of products that I work on are ultimately powered by recommendations and algorithms, and that's where a lot of my interest was. And so once NX came along, it made Elixir a viable option for me to start using. And then the LLM specifically, obviously that's kind of new in the last year. My friend Jason Liu, who created the Instructor Python library, he was the original guy who had all these ideas. I just kind of stole them and brought them to Elixir. We worked together. We went to college together. We were roommates. So we have an iMessage thread going on, and he's like, "Oh, check out what I did with this. Look how simple this code is. Like, look how nice these abstractions are." Because we both came from the Python world. We both worked at Stitch Fix together. And so it was just kind of that it was that little teaser. And I was like, "Oh, this would be great in Elixir because then we could do X, Y, Z." And he's like, "Dude, you should do it. You should port it." And so maybe like 6 weeks ago or something like that, I started the new library and started working on it. And just really the motivation is that LLMs are kind of a little bit of a cheat code for machine learning. Like classical machine learning it's not that complicated, but it's daunting to the average engineer. Whereas prompting an LLM is actually really conceptually simple. And so you're like, oh, okay, I want to write an app with like a text classifier. If this was like 2017, it's like, cool. Now you got to learn how to like train a model. With LLMs, super easy.
So I'm going to be that engineer, right? I'm super interested in this topic, but I haven't really made the time. So I feel like there's a lot I don't know. If you were to like explain the concept of like structured prompting in like layman's terms, and the like significance of developers using it for LLMs, can you kind of start there?
Yeah, for sure. So most people's experience with LLMs is through chatbot interfaces. In fact, all the companies that you go and see that release their like new AI thing, it's always in the form of a chatbot. And that's doing a lot of us a disservice because, well, actually, sorry, before I get there, the reason why everything is a chatbot is because, we have these models that have built a world model that ostensibly you can query, and it's just like it's kind of a new paradigm in computing. It says like we don't no longer have to implement the function. We just have to write the signature, right? Ask the question, and the LLM will give you the answer. The problem is that the type signature for it is text in, text out. And so like we can generate text pretty easily as programmers, right? Templates, string interpolation, like easy. Take a data structure, create a string, create a prompt.
Mm-hmm.
But the output, and we know that the output that we're getting from the LLM is meaningful, but it's a string. And parsing strings is really hard, especially when it's not following like a formal language spec or anything like this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And so this is why every LLM is a chatbot, because it says, I don't know how to write the code to interpret the response of the LLM, so I'm just going to delegate that to my user. Right? We'll just output the LLM direct to the user. The user can interpret it, right? We're humans. We speak English, that sort of stuff. But the problem is that leaves a whole set of the solution space of what you could leverage this technology for. It doesn't let you access those things because we still don't have functions that can take text and get data structures out of it in a reliable way. So this is where structured prompting comes in. So structured prompting is the realization that says, okay, we need an interop layer between this AI software 2.0 world with software 1.0, because all of our systems that, 50 years of writing code, APIs, all these things, you can't renegotiate those boundaries, right? You can't just go and you don't necessarily have control over those boundaries. So that was the motivation for Instructor. It's this kind of interop layer between the two. And that's what it is it's structured prompting. So it says, let's change the type signature of the LLM. Instead of text in, text out, let's do text in, some schema, and you get that schema out. And then once you have that as the interface, tons of like traditional software 1.0 opportunities rise up where you can start using LLMs but never actually expose it to the user, right? You could backfill a database, right? And say like, well, I have my database schema. I'm building like a cooking app, right? I want all my recipes, right? You can build a seed.exs file that uses Instructor and says like, okay, enumerate every cuisine. Then for every cuisine, enumerate recipes in the format that I want. Right?
Yeah, okay.
And then just save that to the database.
That's really awesome. So you're essentially taking this string and creating structured data that you can actually organize and make relative or, important projects with outside of a chatbot.
Yeah, totally. Because it just turns out it circumvents the string parsing problem, which is probably the biggest hang up why people don't use LLMs more.
I love that. And I was about to ask you what inspired you to start Instructor, but I think we just hit that. So
yeah.
No, that's really awesome. That's cool. Are there any like specific leverages that you get using Elixir, or is it just kind of filling a gap that you saw that Elixir didn't have?
I mean, right now, as it stands, it's mostly just filling a gap. But there is some leverage that you're going to get soon. We've been chatting in the the EFF Slack machine learning channel with Sean Moriarty and Jose to get Instructor integrated with Bumblebee to use. So that's when you can start running the LLM. You can use Instructor as your query interface, but you're actually running the LLM within the Beam as well. So your marginal cost of compute goes to zero because you're just like paying for the hardware. You're not paying by token anymore. You're just paying per for the servers. There's leverage there in terms of reducing operational complexity. But I think that a cooler example of where you get the leverage there is there's a lot of work in Bumblebee to support streaming And because we can have different gen servers running kind of concurrently, and they can like stream messages back and forth, you can very easily build kind of streaming interfaces that plug multiple different kinds of models together. So here's an example. We're chatting right now. We're on the live stream. You could have the audio being piped into one NX server that's running Whisper, transcribes, right? And then you can stream those tokens into an LLM that's running in a different NX server that's running kind of continuously running a query against it with instructor that says like, hey, anytime you do some like entity recognition, right? Like, hey, we mentioned the instructor, and then it can spawn off another agent that goes and looks up for the docs and maybe pulls up relevant information, puts in a little sidebar, right? Or like injects it into chat or something. That's something that like, yeah, you could do that in other languages. That's a pain to get that to be done reliably. But with a lot of the concurrency primitives that you have with OTP, this I think starts to become, these types of applications start to become much simpler to implement in Elixir compared to doing it in something like Python.
Yeah, so that's really cool.
That's not here today, but that's coming.
No, that's really cool because you can just dynamically spawn processes or gen servers to do unlimited amount of work that you want, really. So that's really awesome. I love that. Let's see here. I'm trying to know or have good questions to ask because this stuff is so over my head. If people are interested in like going down this avenue and maybe even contributing to instructor, are there like good resources that you recommend to get started, or like where should someone that doesn't know anything about, large language models or any of that get started?
Yeah. So, Jason like really emphasizes the documentation in the Python library. If you actually look at the Python library, the documentation's like 10 to 20 times larger than the actual code base. It's actually a remarkably simple library to implement. So he has a bunch of, he calls them cookbooks. I've ported a bunch of them to the Elixir documentation so you can find them in the instructor EX. But if you're unsure, like this is a new paradigm, like you're used to solving problems. So you say, okay, well, I'll decompose it. This is how I write the function and whatnot. But with LLMs, it kind of implements the function for you. And that kind of is like an inversion of thinking that you're not going to, it's like a new skill that you need to develop to think of like how to use this. So the cookbooks are really good examples because what they document is examples of people successfully using it in different ways that you might not have considered. So those are in the instructor documentation. We have tons of live books, and it goes through, it explains not only the code, how it's set up, but why it's that way, all the various features of instructor and how we use them to get these examples. So that's probably a good way to like go through the introduction live book. It explains the features. It's a very, very simple library. And then go over to the cookbooks and see how people use it so that you can start to get inspiration. You say, oh, I could do that in my app here. Or maybe I could like mutate that a little bit. But it's really does actually, it's the most, people are mostly bounded by their creativity with it.
That makes a lot of sense. I'll make sure to link all those docs in the description after this live stream too, because it's mostly for myself. I'm interested. I need to make time because I feel like we're at that point. If we don't start jumping on this technology, we're going to kind of be left behind as software developers.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what is your like overall like envision like with rapidly changing AI and technology with like keeping instructor relevant and moving with it versus just building a set of tools now, but then, it's irrelevant in 8 months?
Yeah. When I worked, so at Stitch Fix, the vast majority of the time that I spent there was as a platform engineer, and we had to design like internal tools and frameworks. And this is like a skill that needs to be developed. Like, how do you build something that doesn't get left behind with changing underlying assumptions. I think Instructor Jason did a very good job with the design of Instructor, where you'll see libraries like LangChain in the Python world. And you go look at the documentation, it's just like, they just keep on, anytime there's something new, they have to like slap on a new class and whatnot, because they created the API layer a little too high. And so basically they every change breaks the assumptions of the library, so they came off to adding stuff. Whereas like Instructor, it's like, it's been around just as long as LangChain-ish. Hasn't really changed that much. Doesn't need to, because it's operating at a little bit of lower level of complexity and gives the user the building blocks to customize them themselves. So things that I foresee coming that like might be an issue are supporting vision. So a lot of these models now let you not just put text, but send up photos as well. So we might need to change the interface a little bit for that. But Instructor, how the API is really designed, is that it's designed to be whatever OpenAI has plus one parameter. And so it just gets to evolve naturally with whatever the OpenAI library, and there's not much work that you have to do in the library itself. So that was like an intentional design choice. We didn't wrap OpenAI. It's like, you're just making an OpenAI call, and we just like add one extra parameter that does a little bit of post-processing and pre-processing of the query. Yeah.
Nice. I feel like that's smart for sure. What do you think some of the like most exciting opportunities in machine learning and AI will be for Elixir developers in the near future, this year, next year? Nothing too far off.
Yeah. Well, I think there's one part that's tricky, where the new models are coming out so fast. You're in a little bit of a rat's race to, make sure that you're still supporting the state of the art. So it's a tricky position to be in for any language that's not Python, because the default implementation of all the researchers is naturally in Python. So that's going to be a little bit tricky, but there are huge benefits to doing it in Elixir, that it's a little bit scattershot in the Python world. So getting a little bit into like the technical bits for a second here. When you use NX, so all these machine learning libraries are using NX, and there's an additional macro that you get when you use NX, where you do like the def n. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but you can it's a subset of Elixir. So it's just like a def, you're creating a function, but it's just for numerical operations, and it supports like 80% of the syntax of Elixir, but like it's constrained in a specific way that allows it to compile down to efficient machine code to like do the operations fast.
Okay.
But then what also it can do is that if you have like a def n calling another def n, that gets like fused together and like compiled down, and like they're not necessarily making like function calls when it's actually down a layer. It might get inlined. So this is called what's it called? Like tensor operation fusion or whatever, I think is the term. And there are some libraries in Python that do this, but it's like built into the fundamentals of NX. So Sean actually has like a post from using NX serving from like September or something like that, where he just took a model and he re-implemented it in Elixir or in NX using Axon, and set up an NX serving for it. And like, it was 30% faster than running on Python, which is surprising. Like you wouldn't expect that. You'd be like, okay, machine learning in Python is always going to be like Python, but like a little bit worse, because it's always going to use not the state of the art models, and it's going to be a little bit slower because it's like the beam. That's actually not true, at least on the performance benefit. And then in terms of on the like being behind on the models, I think there's a really interesting opportunity to figure out how to maybe like build up a good community in Elixir that is porting these models. I know we already do have a bunch, but there's so many models out there. It's not just LLMs. There's good text-to-speech models, speech-to-text. There's, you just go on Hugging Face. There's like 10,000 new models every day.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, so I think that there's like, I don't know if I really answered your question there, but it's just more of riffing on machine learning and Elixir. Like it's not just you get to use it in your favorite language. Like there are real benefits that make it better than doing it in Python.
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered my question. I think it was like such an open question. Any answer was good, right? What are, let's see. So I know you kind of touched on this, that instructor's not a wrapper to OpenAI, right? What do you have like a plan in place to stay on top of trends as like you have to build on models or add anything to it? Like what is the implementation behind it?
Yeah, we're kind of lucky in that sense where so Jason does this full time, well, almost full time.
Okay.
In the Python world. So he developed this library as a result of doing contracting work. So he contracts with all the top AI companies. So I did like Rewind AI, Notion, a few other companies that are using like shipping AI in their apps. And his roadmap for the Python version of Instructor is directly informed by that. And he's being paid as a contractor and basically do this. So I get a benefit from that where we just get to go. I have a text message thread with Jason and he's just tweeting new stuff and he's messaging me and he's like, oh, hey, for example, he just revamped how they do retries in a cool way. And he just sent it to me. He's like, I think you could do this easily with this Elixir library. And I was like, cool, I'll get on that. So he's like almost the PM for it indirectly. But you get a lot of benefits from that because it's not like I say that a little tongue in cheek, but like I'm serious about it in the sense that it's not just speculation. It's going to be ideas that are vetted against paying contract clients that are using Instructor, like the Python version of Instructor in production.
Yeah, real world.
We're just going to port that. Yeah,
real world production cases. That's awesome. So don't lose Jason at all costs.
Right? Yeah. Jason is a national treasure. Keep him around.
I love that. So have you managed other open source projects in the past, or is Instructor one of your first? And what kind of learning curves or organization skills have you had to learn with starting this project?
Yeah. I mean, I've written plenty of libraries before, but never managed this. I never managed seriously an open source project. Most of the time I just like, throw it out into the ether if people use it. I've had a few things over the years that, people used and brought into their companies or forked it or whatever. So yeah, this is in terms of like managing an open source project. This is a first for me in one sense. So I don't know, I'm all ears, I'm just going around talking about it and trying to write better docs and getting people to submit issues and join the Discord. I think we're doing it right, but hey, you let me know.
I have no idea. The only reason I ask is a current project that I'm building on my YouTube channel is just a gist clone.
Okay.
But after I hit like the major features, like after I teach it and have like, an MVP version, my goal is to open source it. And one of my major questions is always like, how do you properly manage like future features, UI implementations and all that? And I was looking at yours and like currently it looks like you just kind of have a checklist. Can people kind of just grab something that they want to work on and kind of claim it? Or how is that working for you?
So we most of the contributions so far have just been around like documentation stuff. That checklist was actually more for just me.
Okay.
That's how I start. That's how all my projects, the README at the bottom of it is just a checklist of like, get it out of my head onto the paper, so to speak. And then I clean it up. So it's not a very serious it is a serious backlog, but it's not designed. It's not there to be like, hey, contributors, take this random chicken scratch that I wrote because I had an idea in the middle of code or something like that. So I should really properly clean that up. What I will say is that like the definite roadmap is to just chase down features that you see in Python. Because like I have the core of it, but the Python stuff's adding more. So would recommend people to go and look at the Python library. The interface is very similar, so it shouldn't be too unfamiliar reading through it. And then if you see something in there that like isn't in the instructor version, or sorry, in the Elixir version, open a PR or open an issue, you know, and we can prioritize that way. I'm all ears. It's useful. It's working for what I'm using it for. So I don't have any like definite needs for new features, but if there's no signal coming into me through GitHub issues, then the next features are going to be the ones that I personally want. So, you know,
yeah,
that's just what it's going to be otherwise.
So if people want to get involved, is the best way to reach out to you on like Twitter, or do you prefer GitHub issues? What is your preference if people want to help out and contribute?
Yeah, really anywhere. Twitter is great. I'm on Twitter all the time. GitHub issues is definitely like more permanent. Once you have like, you know, code samples or something a little more concrete, like definitely catalog it there, because, you know, Twitter, the half-life of a tweet is like 36 hours. So like it might get lost.
Yeah.
And then we also have a Discord server that's for Instructor. It's linked to in the README, so you can get invite there. And that has not just Elixir Discord, but it has the Python one. It has general questions. There's a TypeScript version of the library. They're actively working on a Ruby version of the library, and good conversations about forward-thinking things are there, as well as inspiration. Like people are posting like kind of showcases of like, oh, hey, I'm using it for this. I ran, you know, so those three: Discord, Twitter, and GitHub.
I'm going to have to join. I'm going to be that noob. I think this is a topic I need to start learning, because it just the power and all the cool projects behind it. I just love the idea. Can you talk about any of the projects you work on that you're using Instructor for?
Yeah. So this was one I'm writing a Twitter bot right now. Just out of like kind of a curiosity to see if I could build my own recommendation algorithm for Twitter, like externally. So what it does right now is it's actually all just in a live book. It's not even like that sophisticated, but it uses Wallaby, which is like the browser automation. Like it's really for like browser testing, but like fundamentally it just automates the browser. So it's a little bot that goes and just like sits on my Twitter in a background window and just reads tweets throughout the day and clicks on people's profiles. And what it uses is Instructor to basically do entity extraction. Like, what does this user like tweet a lot about? About Elixir things, or are they like, you know, 80% football and 20% Elixir or whatever?
Okay.
So I use Instructor for that part to like do some entity extraction. And then I want to go and surface things like one of the fundamental things in the recommendation is that Twitter's recommender optimizes for time on site. So naturally, I just get like all these videos that just like hijack my brain and are like, you know, check out this like fight that happened behind Walmart. And I'm like, I don't want that, but like I'm gonna watch it, you know. Like I'm only a man, you know.
The dangerous cycle of scrolling, right? You're like, ooh, a fight video? You have to watch it.
Exactly. So the little app that I'm working on is just something that goes in and browses tweets, tries to go and create a candidate set, uses Instructor to determine like what these tweets are actually about. And then what it's also going to do is it's going to catalog all of the things that I tweet about. Not that I like go and view and like, but like I tweet about, and then we'll try to do a match there. It says like, oh, this person's chatting about, for instance, I tweeted, I think like a week ago about upgrading my Phoenix from Cowboy to Bandit. Got huge performance gains. Like, you know, people are talking about that, but that's not showing up in my feed. And so it's going to go and it's going to say like, oh, hey, there's all these interesting tweets that are not only about Elixir, but also about this thing that you've also been talking about. Do you want to like hop in the conversation?
That's really cool.
So that's an example of where I'm using Instructor, and that's really just as like a text classifier, really. It's a very actually simple use case of Elixir. Most of the code is around like browser automation of Twitter. But it's been a fun one. It's been good to be able to use both and kind of tie them together instead of just these Instructor examples kind of in isolation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are there any community projects that you find super cool too that people are building right now?
I know a lot of people are just getting started out with the Elixir version. So there aren't tons of Elixir apps um, that I've seen so far. But in the wider ecosystem, there's some really cool demos from the TypeScript version of the
Okay.
application that leverages streaming. So one of the things that we implement in Instructor is that you can actually like partially stream the JSON as it's being like outputted. So you can just imagine like you have a struct and all the keys are set to nil, and then like as each key comes in, like we hydrate it, and as a result, you can get this like kind of live streaming feedback. I have a demo on this I posted on Twitter, and there's some really cool examples of them doing that in JavaScript, where they'll create like it's still a chatbot interface, but like the bot will start responding with text, and then it will like stop and it will start hydrating like recipe cards or like different kind of cards.
Okay.
And it's not like you make the call and you wait 60 seconds for the response. You get this streamed in live, and it's a really cool flashy like UI demo. So the TypeScript boys love that stuff. They're using it all. They love the streaming. So we have that in Elixir too. Like, but someone just needs to hook it up to a live view, and you could get some like killer demos out of that. But yeah, some of the flashiest stuff is around it's called partial streaming, is what we call it.
Okay.
In Instructor. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. I'm gonna have to figure out a good use case and maybe add a feature to my JustClone project.
Yeah. Well, there's probably some.
It could find like similar code written by other users to connect with them or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you could even use it for like language detection. I think that'd be a really easy, simple one to do.
You know,
I don't know if you have that in there.
I don't right now. I'm just pulling the extension off the file name that you have to manually add. So language detection would be an awesome feature to add.
Right, because like you think about how GitHub does it. Like they have that open source one that does the regex. I forget what it's called, like Scholar or something. Anyways, GitHub built one,
yeah,
like in like 2011 that basically looks at strings and tries to guess the programming language. But like now you could just use an LLM for that. It will know.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that because
that's a really easy way to get your like feet wet without it's conceptually very simple.
Okay, awesome. And I know who to harass now if I need help.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, DM.
Perfect. What are some of the most exciting things you look forward in the future with this stuff that isn't currently available yet, but you know it's on its way?
Yeah. I feel like it's the addiction of everyone who plays in this AI space to create like an automated agent that like operates your computer for you. And so you saw stuff like, man, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, where there was like Auto GPT and Baby GPT. And I don't know if you're on Twitter, you saw those things. And they're like, once again, super flashy demos, but like you never actually saw a product ship. Right? There's even startups that are like, oh, we run AI agents that will just do the thing for you. But there's no buy now link. Right? It's just join the wait list. Whenever someone says join the wait list, it's because they don't have anything. Yeah. It's like the people who have stuff have a buy now link. So it's the temptation of everyone because they see these things and you're like, oh, if it can just write the function, just control my computer. So the new image models that are coming out right now, I think make this sort of kind of computer automation and agent-based workflows a lot easier to do. Because sometimes you can't really express the complexity of the world just in text, but you can in images, right? An image is worth 1,000 words. This sort of motivation. So I think there's some cool stuff to do in Elixir there. Once again, also because of like gen servers and whatnot. Like it's like the actor model is like really well suited to having like a team of autonomous agents kind of working, coordinating to solve a larger problem. So who knows, maybe I'll change my Twitter recommendations bot to be like an actual agent. So instead of like manually scripting the automation around the web page, maybe I'll use Instructor to like get it to control where the mouse goes and clicks and finds the tweets that way, instead of a bunch of manual code. But yeah, I think there's some cool stuff there. I think, but the skeptic in me also says we've been on the edge of that, on the precipice of that for like, just in 2 weeks, some new AI, right? For 8 months now. So maybe not, but I don't know. I'm still a believer.
Well, I also feel like we went through a huge wave of just it being the coolest thing. It's going to end the world, but it'll do everything for everyone. And I feel like that little like hype wave is settling a little bit, and now it's more realistic projects and kind of more useful stuff underway. Hype, it's kind of like NFT hype,
Yeah. Well, one of the things why I think that happened was because you can get all these really cool demos where you're just doing like string in, string out, like with baby AGI. Mm-hmm. This actually kind of leads to like why Instructor was built. This is okay when you try to ship it, it only works 60% of the time or 40% of the time or whatever, right? And so like when it does work, it's like, oh my God, the future's here. But you're like, you actually can't ship a product like that. And it's actually because there's a lot of like good software engineering best practices that you still want to use when you're coding around LLMs. It's not some magic bullet. The problem is that all the tools were not available to you because it was just outputting text that you can interpret, right? That is the motivation for Instructor, like originally in Python. It says like, hey, how do we get the reliability of these things up? Well, we need to get these parsing errors. Like we need to solve the parsing problem. So Instructor solves the parsing problem. You will never get a parsing error. Well, like almost never get a parsing error. And then you can start moving on to like classical data science sort of validation for creating production algorithms, which is just like, what's my error rate, right? What's my validation set? These sorts of things. Like all of this happens in classical ML, and people kind of thought with LLMs, oh, you don't really need to do it. But like once you're actually getting to production, that's the kind of stuff you want to start tracking, right? And you say like, okay, put a thumbs up and thumbs down based on the result, and then measure whether like, did it do what you wanted it to do? Thumbs down, then go and take your errors, cluster them, like just go look at your errors and be like, okay, anytime someone asks like a recipe app, anytime we're talking about like bananas, the model messes up or something like that, right? Maybe that shows up in the error set. And then you can do like the standard engineering practice of like, okay, here's our backlog. Here's our set of errors. Here's the largest error by volume, right? Let's go fix that. Maybe it's through prompt engineering, maybe through its supplementing of data, maybe it's training a new model. There's different things that you can do. But you just really couldn't do that before when the output was just like raw text and you didn't have like, what is your metric when it's just raw text?
I was going to say you can't really do it without manual intervention. Right. Yeah, right. That makes sense. I feel like I'm opening up a can of worms with this now.
Yeah. It is definitely like, it is definitely one of those things where the most trivial thing to do with Instructor is extremely easy. And then as just the nature of LLMs, as you start pulling that thread and you start going deeper and deeper, you'll start naturally getting into like classical machine learning validation and evaluation, issues, which is not that hard. It really is just like categorize your errors and count how many of each type of error you're getting, and then try to solve them. Right. It's I think people overestimate the complexity that is actually there with machine learning. It's basically just that.
I don't know. We're about to find out. We'll find out with I can broadcast my learning curve so everyone knows how not smart I am.
Well, dude, if you're ever working on something and you want some help, hit me up. I can
for sure. Well, I think the language detection will be where I start. I think that sounds like a good spot for me.
Yeah. This would be I'm super curious to see if you get some stuff that people paste in. So like, for example, if I just go and create a new gist in your clone and just paste in like, I don't know, a CNN article.
Yeah.
Right. Like what language is this? It pops out English. And you're going to be like, wait, what? Right? That's not what I want. right? And so you're going to that will be some good QA testing that I think you'll go through in this process. And you'll be like, oh, well, how do I solve that problem, right? I only want it to be programming languages. So maybe you'll go and like prompt engineer that. Or maybe in Instructor, when you're defining the language output, you can use an Ecto enum and say, it can only be one of these 30 languages that I support. Or you can say, you always provide an escape hatch and say like, if it's not that, you don't have to choose one of those options. You can also say, I don't know. Or not a valid language.
Or just make it like a text file and then done.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of different options you can use as your catch-all.
Yeah, I like that.
And then like if you have the catch-all, so like, just pulling on this thread a little further, you say, okay, now you go and ship the feature. People start using it. You support, let's say, 12 languages that you could think of when you originally coded it. And then people come in and they're like, oh yeah, I really love Perl. Right. So I'm going to create all my gists of like my Perl scripts because there isn't a package manager, whatever. Right. Say, oh, but that wasn't in the enum. Right. And your catch all is just like, I don't know. Right. We start logging that. Right. And then you can go and say, maybe in like a background task, say for all the ones that were just text files, ask the question again of what language it is, but unconstrained. Right. Not just the 12 languages, just let the LLM output whatever it wants for that. And then go and start grouping the logs based on that. And then it will illuminate to you that says like, oh, I have a lot of users who are using Perl. For instance, this is contrived, but like, for instance.
Or why are people using Haskell?
Yeah, exactly. I don't, this is for Beam languages only, I don't know. So that's what I mean in terms of like, when you start pulling the thread, you say like, you just start doing QA on your application, you start using it, and you start looking at the failure cases, look at the examples, and you can even use Instructor in more unconstrained ways to help you, more rigorously do an analysis on the errors. So there's other options there pulling on the thread.
No, yeah, I love that.
Ahead of myself.
Going down the rabbit hole. It'll be fun. I'm sure all my subscribers would love a little like machine learning or LLM example. So we'll see how it goes. I'll have to go ahead.
Sorry. One guy, he gave his name's Charlie Holtz, I think it's Holtz, I think it is. He gave a talk at ElixirConf. He's another great person to follow who builds really cool like web demos. He leverages Replicate a lot, which basically lets you spin up these various models with like a REST API. So it's like easy to integrate against them. If like looking for inspiration of how to slot all these kind of generative AI tools into web apps, he is a creative genius. He comes up with such funny, clever little ideas. So that's a great follow. I don't know if he's using Instructor yet, but he uses a lot of other machine learning models.
I'll definitely have to find him and follow him. That's awesome. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions for Thomas? This is the guy to ask for machine learning and all the hard, smart people stuff.
Yeah, I'll just defer to Jason. Whatever the question is.
What is we'll just let that. It's a little delayed usually, but what is your current day job? What do you do with most of your time?
Yeah, so I still work at Stitch Fix.
Okay.
We have, I built the data platform out there. So we started off like the business is a clothing retailer, where you don't like select your clothes. We select the clothes for you, and you keep them if you like them and pay for them, and whatever you don't like, you send back to us. So like recommendations is like at the core of the business. So we built a platform that made like doing research on recommendations very easy. And then slowly over the years, that skill set kind of proliferated out throughout the business into like operations research, right? It's like, where do we put our inventory across these different warehouses, these sorts of things. So what I do in my day job is I work on that data platform and really work with our different teams around the company to figure out how can they better leverage machine learning and statistics to better operate the business instead of everything just being like, 1990s style, just Windows form, or not Windows forms, but like, web forms and whatnot, where it's just always human operators and you do like maybe a little bit of aggregation. So it's like, hey, maybe we can do like statistical approaches and like eliminate certain functions and delegate that to machine learning. So that's what I do in my day job.
Awesome. So you're always in the weeds with it.
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. All right, let's see. I wish there was an AI app built into the Elixir ecosystem. Would chat with Hex Docs be a good app for NX instructor or something else?
Yeah, that would be good. I think it was some of the guys over at fly.io built a like cross or like a search index across all the hex docs. So you have like, usually you go to hex docs and you have like search in it, but it's just for that one package.
Right.
They had built one that indexed like all the packages. But it didn't have like, as far as I know, it just did like an embedding search, like a kind of like a full text search-esque thing.
Okay.
Across all of them. But then it didn't have like the chat with your doc sort of feature. So that would be a killer option. Actually, if that's open source, someone could probably go take that down, take the search results that come back from what it does today, then pipe that in to an LLM that says like, okay, answer this question based on the relevant docs that it found. That's for, if people are wondering what that's a RAG. If you see on Twitter and people are talking about RAG applications, RAG, it's a retrieval augmented generation. That is what that is. That's all it is. So it just says like, here are all the docs, here are all the paragraphs, text chunks of all the docs that are possibly, or that are in the ecosystem. First, there's a first stage search that says, okay, pull up the 10 most relevant documents to the question that I'm asking. And then give all of that to the LLM that says, given the context of these 10 documents, answer this question. And hopefully it comes up with like a reasonable response. So we already have the first bit. Like the fly.io guys did that. So someone could totally use Instructor to build the other one. It'd probably become like a hero in the community because like hex docs are great, but like, man, if you had like an AI hex docs, that would be awesome.
So guys, whoever's listening, be a hero.
That could be your after the GIST clone. That can be your advanced course.
That would
your
be
Instructor 102.
Yeah, that would actually be a lot of fun. I'll have to.
It would be fun too because like I'm pretty sure that project is open source, so you can like already start like the scraping and indexing and embedding. That stuff's like not trivial. The instructor part is going to be pretty easy. It's just like take the 10 search results, put it into this little prompt, and like get the response. It could be a little fun project for someone.
Yeah, I love that. Someone did ask why Elixir and machine learning. I feel like you kind of covered that question throughout this whole chat, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing I didn't say on it, which was kind of implied, but it's worth saying explicitly, that there is a lot of leverage being in one language ecosystem. Like you'll always have to learn new skills, but if you have to do that also in a different language, and like kind of match them up together, and when you're actually trying to ship your code, you're going to lose a lot of productivity. Most productivity gains come from familiarity with your tool set. And so you say like, okay, I just want to add text to speech or whatever to my app. Well, now I got to use Python. Well, how do I set up my editor for that? Like, how do I deploy that? How do I monitor it? All these sorts of things. Like you think it's easy. It's like, oh yeah. I just have this script. I run it. I take the results and I bring it back into my application. But there's like this big underbelly of complexity that it actually comes from shelling out to a different language that like you don't appreciate when you're first creating your prototype or demo. And so the fact that Elixir with NX has like really good primitives now for machine learning, the work is just like, let's just build all this stuff on top of it. And you get the benefit of just being in one tool chain. You're going to monitor it the same way you're used to monitoring your Phoenix app. There's no other stuff that you need to learn. So the cost of adoption is going to go down for a lot of developers. And why Elixir? Because you could do that with any language, to be clear, right? But all the other languages don't have the web benefits that you get with Elixir, right? Like you can't do that. Like the web ecosystem in Python, like it's there, It's like, okay, like it's fine. I'm actually not trying to knock it, but it's not Elixir,
Right.
like Phoenix is awesome. So, you could say like, okay, am I going to, port one to the other or machine learning to Elixir, right? For me,
I personally like being like, a one technology, one language person, because before I started my Elixir game, I was all over the place, JavaScript, TypeScript, Swift, Kotlin, all the nasty things that you can combine, right? And the last 3 years I've been trying to mostly bring my focus to Elixir. And just from the standpoint of software engineering alone, I feel like you kind of double down on your skill set just because you're only concentrating in one ecosystem.
Yeah. I had a funny thought the other day. Coming in as an outsider to this community, I noticed that there's like a big emphasis on helping each other find jobs in Elixir. And that it's like, there's a big emphasis on it because there's an impression from the outside that it's like an uphill battle, whether that's true or false. But I was like kind of thinking about like what the reason might be for that. It's like if you actually have a language that's like very productive and can like do it all and whatnot, like you just don't need that many engineers. So you're actually going to like, if the technology, like put simply, if the technology is so good, you're just not going to need that many Elixir engineers, which is like a problem then for everyone who wants to get in. They're like, well, okay, you got to start creating the companies because like the companies that do exist are just happy with their like 8 engineers because they don't need a 300-person engineering team,
Yeah, that is true. Well, I think the adoption of Elixir is slow because, changing your infrastructure, if you already have it built up, is extremely costly, right? So now it's just spreading the word of how amazing that like Elixir can be, right? With like Bleacher Report and all these things where they've cut their server costs, almost 100x. Like crazy stories you hear, right?
Yeah. Well, I think about it as like, I don't know if what I just said is actually like the fundamental dynamics going on, but if it is, what it suggests is that the right strategy is not just evangelizing Elixir at big companies and trying to find the jobs, but really kind of doing like the AWS strategy. It's like AWS grows like reliably because they're like, any startup, you get 100,000 free Amazon credits. You don't have to pay for 3 years, right? And the hope is that like, it's insignificant. It's, what are they? It's a startup. How much money are they really going to spend on AWS's bill? But then like 5 years from now, they're going to be the next Airbnb. And like, well, now you're locked in, right?
Well, I have a big gripe with like the microservice adoption of things because you get locked in, and once AWS has you, it's so hard to move.
Yeah. And that's true about just even technology choice. It's even true about Elixir, not on the infra layer, but like just on the language adoption. It's the same point that you just made.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And so you say like, oh, well, given that, like take a page out of their playbook, right? Like what we should be doing is advocating for people to start companies in Elixir and be focusing in the Elixir community on like the entrepreneurship side, not the like, where are the jobs at? Even though everyone is looking for the jobs, it's like you got to go like one step upstream and solve it at like the source, which is like you just need new companies using Elixir, because if you succeed in that, within 3 years, you're going to have a lot of Elixir jobs.
I'm trying to do my part. So
good.
My day job is a dev shop called Hired Gun Apps, and whenever we get a project, our back end is, I usually am the back end engineer, and it is built in Elixir.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. So slowly, all these little small startups that hire us for their apps, we can slowly integrate Elixir into their bloodline.
That's perfect. The language starts off with a bunch of consulting contracting agencies, and then the next era of it is all the companies that contracted grow up and then create tons of jobs for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Exactly. I love that. That's awesome. Well, I think this was awesome, Tom. Whoa, we hit like almost an hour here. That's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. True.
But This has been an awesome conversation, and it was great meeting you. I look forward to harassing you as I start learning machine learning and start messing around with Instructor, because
Yeah, for sure.
it is going to be a path I go down, because I think making content on it would be super beneficial as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, hit me up anytime, and yeah, thanks for having me on.
Awesome.
It's been fun.
We should mention, because what originally got you on my radar was I was talking with Michael Lubis from Proaxial, and you have a meetup, a remote meetup on Monday.
That's right. Yeah, the Denver Elixir meetup. I'm calling in, and I have a talk that I've been working on about the motivation, some of the stuff I went over here. But I got more detail.
Awesome. So I'll put that link in the description on here.
Sweet,
so
that'd be great.
Maybe we can get you some more viewers on Monday. I'll be listening in as well, just because I'm interested in this subject and it's time to learn. So
yeah. No, for sure. Thanks. Yeah, everyone come out to the Denver one. I think you can just call in. So it's,
I think it's just Zoom.
If you have questions that we didn't get to here that you want answered, then think about it over the weekend, and I'll respond to them on Monday.
Yeah, perfect. And again, dude, thank you so much for making the time. I know my little Elixir Mentor community appreciates it. And if you want to join another Discord server, jump on over. I'm sure people would love to hear from you. So
for sure. Cool.
But all right, man, it was great meeting you. Great discussion.
Yeah.
And I hope everyone has a good weekend.